So the Cato Institute, which blows me away on face value, Pat, that the Cato Institute shared this. It's more of a libertarian-leaning outfit, but they reported on a general government accountability office report that states that traditional right-wing extremists make up a vast majority of domestic terrorist incidents. Now, they're citing data between September 12, 2001 and today. Since September 12, 2001, there have been 85 violent extremist incidents that resulted in death. 62 of the 85, which represents 73%, were committed by quote unquote traditional right-wing violent extremist groups. 27%, 23 of the events, 27% of the total were committed by quote unquote radical Islamic violence. So this goes against what most people fear. Right. The general fear, Pat, in the society is that you're going to get attacked by some type of Islamic terrorism. And this is the entire push that we have in the government is like 100% behind, getting rid of radical right wing terrorism. But I mean, getting rid of Islamic terrorism. But the real threat in the United States since September 11th has been right-wing terrorism.
Right, and the top reason in the world for terrorism at this point is radical Islamic terrorism. But in the United States' experience since 9/11, it's been right-wing terrorism. I think environmental terrorism even ranks higher than Islamic terrorism.
And to be sure, right, so I'm sure one of the first things people are going to comment and say, well, why didn't he include September 11th? Why did this research not include September 11th? Well, based on the methodology that they use, they're not counting the number of people that were killed. They're counting the number of events. So technically, they could throw in September 11th and still get about the same results. So you would go from 85 violent events and go to 86 violent events, and then you would still have 62 of the 86 from radical right-wing traditional terrorists, and then 24 would be. So it doesn't really change the analysis. When you talk about violence and terroristic violence here in the United States, we have more of a reason to be fearful of Billy Bob, if I could be stereotypical, than we do Ahmed.
Yeah, and I mean, the right-wing talking point, at least as far as Donald Trump is concerned, is that we have to eliminate Muslim immigration into the United States because of the threat of terrorism.
Right.
But given this study, and we've actually known this for quite some time, people like me should be profiled, right? It should be young white males because in instances of terrorism, that's the group that tends to do it the most in this country.
Should I leave? I feel threatened now. I feel
unsafe.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to make
There's
light.
Some distance between us, at least.
I have enough room to run. I'm sorry to make light of a very serious topic, but here's the next part of this, right? There's a reason that we are afraid of Ahmed and not Bill, and that's because our media. According to the same study, they examined LexisNexis, and they pulled together reports between 2011 and 2015, reports on terrorism. There was 449% more coverage of radical Islamic terrorism than there was traditional right-wing terrorism in the United States. 449% compared to the reality that since 2001, 73% of the violent experiences that led to death in the United States has been at the hand of right wing. So our media, they're complicit in this perception that we should be afraid in the United States, to be clear, that we should be afraid of radical Islamic terrorism when the reality, the real threat is traditional right wing terrorism.
And of course, racism plays a big part into that too, because typically when we think of Muslims, we think of people from the Middle East. So there's this outsider perspective of trying to fear the other that the media likes to play up. And then there's also the tactics that the terrorists use. So maybe radical Islamic terrorists would be more inclined to use bombs rather than guns. And we have a gun culture in this society, so we're not as fearful of that.
Right. That's a great distinction, right? We really won't even consider in many cases what one of these people would do as terrorism. We won't qualify it as terrorism, and that's probably plays a huge role in it as well. We also have a president who will say everything about radical Islamic terrorism and say absolutely nothing about right-wing terrorism that has had an uptick since he was elected. So that plays into the equation as well. But there's one last thing, and I want to get your last word on it. One last thing that plays into this is the fact that you know, if you think about it, if you look at the commercials that are run on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, the commercials that are run are coming from defense contractors, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin. You know, they run, and if you think about it, there is no money whatsoever for the defense contractors in waging a war against right-wing terrorism in the United States. There is plenty of money in waging war against Islamic terrorism abroad. So if you think about it, there's a vested interest into keeping the conversation being about 449% more coverage on radical Islamic terrorism, because there's actually money in the fear that Americans have of radical Islamic terrorism.
Yeah, and that conflict is patently clear, because I don't know about you, but I'm not out there buying aircraft carriers and planes and ammunition on all this stuff. It's directly to appeal to the media outlets.
100% so. It has absolutely nothing to do with the audience that's watching, because there's not a single person who's watching MSNBC who's going to buy something from Lockheed Martin. But you know, you said it best. So, but this is the problem, and there's so many layers of responsibility to this. But the fact of the matter is, in the United States, since September 11, 2001, there have been more incidents of traditional right-wing terrorism than there has been radical Islamic terrorism. Yet there has been 449% more coverage of Islamic terrorism than traditional right-wing terrorism.